Good evening, I'm Samantha Vadas in Hong Kong and welcome to View TV News. Coming up on tonight's show, Carrie Lam marks the founding of the People's Republic of China by thanking Beijing and reminding Hong Kongers to safeguard national security. Clashes in Wan Chai as demonstrators test the limits and rally for independence on National Day. And a breakthrough for Canada and the United States. Negotiators from both sides finally agreed to a revamped North American trade deal. Good evening. Chief Executive Carrie Lam marked National Day today by thanking Beijing for all the support it gives to Hong Kong. The city is marking the 69th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China with a string of events, including a fireworks show this evening. First thing this morning, Lam and her predecessor, CY Leung, were among some 2,400 people at the flag-raising ceremony in Wan Chai's Bauhinia Square. Air and sea salutes by local disciplinary forces added to the atmosphere. At the National Day reception afterwards, Lam asked Hong Kongers to bear in mind the mission of upholding our country's sovereignty, security and development interests.
In this past year, I could deeply feel the central government's cordial care and staunch support for the people of Hong Kong. To begin with, when President Xi Jinping paid an inspection visit to Hong Kong last year, he mentioned that relevant central government departments would actively consider adopting concrete measures to facilitate Hong Kong people to study, work and live in the mainland, and provide more opportunities for them to pursue career development on the vast mainland.
Joining the Wan Chai ceremonies from the outside were dozens of activists from the League of Social Democrats. They marched from Southern Playground to the Golden Bauhinia Square, demanding the central government release all human rights lawyers detained on the mainland. They chanted slogans calling for an end to one-party dictatorship and later burned banners that said no national celebrations, only national sorrow. Meanwhile, in Beijing, celebrations began with flag raising in Tiananmen Square this morning. It's the first time the People's Liberation Army was in charge of the National Day ceremony after it took over the duty of guarding the flag from the paramilitary police. Peace doves were set free when the flag reached the top of the pole. Back in Hong Kong, there were clashes in Wan Chai this afternoon as a group of protesters picked the National Day holiday to rally in support of independence. Police from the organised crime team monitored the gathering after the government officially branded the pro-independence Hong Kong National Party an illegal group. Lydia Sung was on the ground.
I'm now outside Wan Chai Southern Playground, where about a dozen of protesters are here this afternoon to show their support for independence as well as the Hong Kong National Party, despite and in fact because of it being banned by the government just a week ago. There's a heavy police presence here, and behind me, protesters are holding banners and flags that say Hong Kong independence. But as you can see, scenes are getting a little bit chaotic here because clashes erupted between the pro-independence activists and some pro-Beijing demonstrators. They are shouting insults at each other with loud speakers, and that's why officers have to separate the two groups with barricades.
And this is the right of every Hong Kong people should have. If someone have any kind of political will, even if it is Hong Kong independent or not, and it cannot be shown, then this is the problem to me.
It's whatever the political idea, but it is our freedom of speech in Hong Kong.
Now, the pro-independence event was organized by a group called the Students' Independence Union, which was set up by a former Civic Party member, Wayne Chan, who said he wanted to support all students who want to advocate for Hong Kong independence in their schools. Now, clearly treading a dangerous line here, many officials from both the SAR government and Beijing have been pushing what they're calling a zero-tolerance approach to any talk of independence at all. Lydia Sung, View TV News.
Well, after their own gathering, the pro-independence rally then joined a bigger pro-democracy march organised by the Civil Human Rights Front. Organisers say 1,500 people took part. Demonstrators called for the protection of the freedom of association as they began their march from Causeway Bay, ending at the government headquarters in Tamar. They had a number of demands, including a thorough investigation of the MTR construction works problems and for the government officials involved to step down. The organisers said they were against calls for independence, but added they also opposed the government's banning of the Hong Kong National Party, saying that infringes on residents' freedoms of speech and association. Staying with today's events, and scuffles broke out near the central government offices after a pro-independence protester was denied access to Civic Square. The demonstrator, who was part of the Civil Human Rights Front March, was said to have been carrying a placard which authorities told him wasn't allowed in the area. He was finally permitted entry after supposedly ditching the banner, but organisers of the march later expressed their concerns over what happened.
Our stand is clear. We don't support the independence of Hong Kong, but it doesn't mean that we can eliminate their voice. If Hong Kong is the place where to uphold the freedom of speech, then we should allow people to express their will, including the independence of Hong Kong.
Queen Elizabeth Hospital has admitted its staff failed to supply oxygen to a patient who was critically ill while he was being transferred to another ward. The patient died just days later. The man was admitted to the hospital last Thursday after suffering from pneumonia and difficulty breathing. His condition worsened that night, requiring staff to transfer him to the intensive care unit using a self-inflating ventilation bag to help him breathe. However, the hospital found the bag wasn't connected to an oxygen tank after the patient's heartbeat stopped. The hospital has apologised to the man's family and is now investigating the incident. As the Golden Week holiday begins, express rail tickets to the SAR were sold out at several stations in southern Guangzhou, though there are fewer trains running today than earlier forecast. The West Kowloon terminus was bustling, with more than 60,000 passengers expected to arrive. The railway had said it would be running 120 trains each way, but the MTR admitted it was only operating some 80 trains today. MTR chairman Fred Ma, who checked out the station earlier, said different aspects were being taken into account, such as media complaints that there weren't enough staff to handle the flow of travellers.
My colleagues and I have to handle the train schedules flexibly, and we are closely in touch with China Railway in this regard. There were media reports saying we don't have enough staff here. Well, if we are already short-staffed, it wouldn't be a good idea to run so many trains, would it? China Railway has to take this into consideration too.
Elsewhere, the rail operator's CEO has defended the company's decision to resume construction work at the Sha Tin Central Links exhibition station. The government announced at the weekend new acceptance levels for the amount of sinking around the Wan Chai project, insisting all nearby structures were safe. Lincoln Leong stressed to reporters that safety is both the company and government's top priority. Coming up next, the latest from the world of business. The United States and Canada have forged a deal hours before a midnight deadline to salvage NAFTA as a trilateral pact with Mexico. The agreement saves an open trade zone that had been about to collapse after nearly a quarter century. Ryan Brooks reports.
The US and Canada have struck a deal to replace NAFTA. Talks went down to the wire late on Sunday. However, Canada has agreed to join what's being called the USMCA, the US-Mexico-Canada Agreement. It beats a midnight deadline US President Donald Trump had set for Canada to sign on, and ends more than a year of negotiations. It also overcomes deep divisions between the two sides. Only days ago, Trump had rejected a request from Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to meet face-to-face on the issue. However, sources told Reuters Trump has approved the deal, and after a late cabinet meeting on the issue, Trudeau gave a thumbs up.
Good day for Canada.
Sources say as part of the deal, Canada gets to keep protection for its lumber industry. But that comes at a cost. It's agreed to allow American farmers wider access to its closed dairy market. The new deal also gives Canada and Mexico some protection from the threat of tariffs on cars. Trump has regularly threatened global tariffs on all automobiles imported to America. If he does, anything under a quota of around 2.5 million cars won't get hit. Getting Canada on board is a win for Trump. For years, he's called the old NAFTA a disaster.
I never liked it. It's been very bad for the United States. It's been great for Canada. It's been great for Mexico.
Trump blames it for a loss in U.S. manufacturing jobs and wants major changes. A senior U.S. official told Reuters Trump intends to sign the new deal at the end of November before it heads to Congress for approval.
Here in Asia, there are signs that growing US-China tensions are taking a toll on business confidence. Many trade-reliant economies are seeing a slump in export orders. In Japan, manufacturing activity expanded at a steady pace in September, with the final reading the same as the month before at 52.5. But the average PMI reading for the third quarter was notably weaker than those for the first and second quarters, and analysts say it suggests weaker momentum. And export orders contracted and production outlook confidence dragged to near two-year lows. South Korea's exports saw the biggest drop in more than 2 years in September, though analysts chalked it up to more holidays. Also of note, exports to the US dropped 11.8% last month, but those to China rose 7.8%. PMI figures showed factory activity rebounded in September, but the pickup was supported by domestic orders, as orders from China and Japan declined, which could overshadow the export outlook. Well, key PMI manufacturing numbers will also be out this week from the Eurozone and the US. And other major events to look out for include the start of the Paris Motor Show, while monthly payrolls will reveal the health of the world's largest economy. Here's Thai Ong with the details.
In the headlights this week, the Paris Motor Show, which promises to showcase new production and concept cars, with BMW set to launch its latest 3 Series vehicle. Despite the fanfare, there's still concern about the auto industry.
Clearly, with a looming trade war, that is a cloud on the horizon. We're not particularly optimistic for what comes ahead, particularly because we are pretty much at peak earnings.
Trade remains on investors' minds, and that's set to continue. The European Union will reportedly tell the world's financial leaders next month at the G20 that trade tensions can have a, quote, serious adverse effect on global growth and that they should reject protectionism. But key PMI manufacturing numbers due out from the Eurozone and the US this week should give a clearer picture of how the world's largest economies are faring.
With, a looming trade war, with a potential no-deal Brexit, I can't imagine that, many of the senior executives of companies feel like really forging ahead with great plans. So I would expect PMIs to stay muted around the world, especially in emerging markets, until we get some more clarity.
In the US, Fed Chairman Jerome Powell has indicated the economy doesn't face a large chance of a recession in the next 2 years. Before the weekend, US non-farm payrolls are due out, which will help provide more clues about the health of the country's economy.
Time for a break now, but coming up next, scrambling to help tens of thousands of people left homeless after the weekend's devastating earthquake. We'll have the details on Indonesia's efforts to get aid to the victims.
We enrage, we envy, we resent, we dislike.
We breathe, we laugh, we cry. We live.
We disappoint, we frustrate, we bore, we suffer.
We fear, we doubt, we defeat, we empower. We communicate.
We talk.
We listen. We learn.
We care. Jazzing up.
Touching hearts.
Paying attention.
Seemingly distant.
Deeply connected.
Behind all the adventure and thrills, it is a massive conspiracy. Steven Spielberg is executive producer. Jurassic World: Fallen Kingdom, available on Now Video Express. But to watch right away with Now TV set-top box. Tune into Now TV channel 106 and check out what's hot on Now Video Express. Or call our service hotline for details. And they lived happily ever after.
But she was in love. Big boats, big houses, big cars.
Is this for real?
I have no doubts that he physically abused her.
I can't believe you're making such a big deal about it.
Check it out. Just try it.
When love turns sour.
Gary! Don't ever touch me again!
A woman can do the unthinkable. Wives with Knives. Tuesday night at 8:30 on View TV6. The most amazing skills, tricks and stunts in the extreme sports scene today. Fascinating and dazzling moments that will get your heart racing. Super fluidity and transcendent experience that will leave you in awe. Giving you access to the best in the world of extreme sports. Saturday and Sunday at 1:30 on View TV6. Wrestling fever explodes on View TV6 as we bring you action from the WWE Raw. Catch the stars, the drama, the thrills and the spills.
What is going on?
A new episode every week. The WWE Raw. Friday at 12 midnight on Channel 96 View TV6. What is the biggest shock of your life? Peel back the curtain on some very different lives. Even death is weirder than you think. In search of proof that ghosts exist.
Hello?
Recast unusual experiences in a new light. View TV6 invite you to a late-night conversation that feels so deep and true. Shocking lives and haunting Australia. Saturday and Sunday night on View TV6.
Welcome back. Indonesia is reeling from Friday's destructive earthquake and tsunami, with the death toll now rising to at least 844. Tens of thousands of people are being moved to shelters as their homes were turned to rubble, and authorities are still working around the clock to find more survivors. Rosanna Philpott reports.
The death toll in a major Indonesian earthquake and tsunami may reach the thousands. Towering waves devastated the island of Sulawesi after the quake struck on Friday. Many of the victims were swept away. Rescue teams are scrambling to dig out people trapped underneath what's left of the city of Palu. Dozens there are reported to still be alive under the rubble of 2 hotels and a mall. One survivor told Reuters she narrowly escaped as the mall folded in around her.
I just finished shopping and went to the cashier. Suddenly everything got dark and the walls started falling around us. It was horrible. I rushed to a broken escalator with my daughters and we made it outside.
Authorities have confirmed grim images from Saturday of body bags lined up in the streets. Damaged roads are slowing down rescue efforts and the military is sending in cargo planes to rescue survivors. And that's just Palu. The wave struck a wide stretch of coastline after it moved in at speeds of 500 miles per hour. Officials are bracing for far worse accounts of death and destruction as outlying areas report in. They'd heard little from Donggala, a fishing town north of the city. It was far closer to the epicenter and home to 300,000 people. Indonesia sits on the Pacific Ring of Fire and is regularly struck by earthquakes. However, questions will likely be asked about why Indonesia's warning systems appear to have failed on Friday. Hundreds of victims had been on the beach for a festival when the tsunami warning sounded, but didn't immediately leave. The country's weather agency says they issued the warning but lifted it 34 minutes later. Officials said they estimated the waves had hit while the warning was still in effect.
Many regional and international governments are extending aid and manpower to Indonesia as it tackles this deadly disaster. Our Southeast Asia correspondent Melanie Ralph has more.
Yes, well, Indonesia is now looking to other countries to help with rescue efforts. Singapore, Thailand, China and Australia have already offered assistance. The EU is also sending cash of nearly $2 million. Aid agencies are scrambling to get food and equipment into quake-hit Sulawesi Island. They're up against the clock. Dozens of people still feared trapped alive under the rubble of collapsed buildings, including hotels and a mall. Now, the big problem is accessibility. The worst affected areas are dogged by blocked roads and damaged airports. Officials say rescuers need heavy equipment to shift slabs of broken concrete. Power outages are also hampering efforts. There are also reports that as many as 1,000 inmates have escaped from various damaged detention facilities in the region. Now, with the number of casualties mounting, authorities have been preparing a mass grave to bury some of the dead as soon as they've been identified. And according to local media, Indonesia's finance minister says the government has allocated about $38 million for disaster recovery. And the country's military has deployed planes to bring people out of Palu. Now, it's hoped that up to 1,500 people could be taken out every day, with children, women and the injured the priority.
A powerful typhoon struck Japan overnight, killing 2 people and injuring more than 100. Typhoon Trami tore across much of the archipelago and caused major transport disruptions and power outages as well. Our Tokyo correspondent Maya Yoshida sent us this update.
Well, it was all clear blue skies in Tokyo today, but the situation was very different overnight when heavy rain and blustery winds wreaked havoc on the city and southern areas. Some parts of the capital suffered the strongest ever winds, forcing airlines to cancel more than 200 flights on Monday. The damage might have been much worse here, as we were initially expecting a Category 3 typhoon. But Trami was downgraded to a strong typhoon from an extremely strong one after it lost a bit of momentum when it approached Tokyo. Precautionary measures were taken quicker than usual. For example, East Japan Railway suspended all train services in Tokyo from 8 p.m. on Sunday. It's the first time the rail company had taken such action, especially during the weekend when many Tokyoites take the train. That's because the country is being hit by a series of natural disasters this year. Trami is actually the 8th typhoon to strike or sweep past Japan since July, including Jebi, which was the most powerful storm to strike Japan in 25 years. Much more typical would be 2 or 3 during this season. So people and businesses moved swiftly this time to avoid further damage. And guess what? We have another typhoon moving towards Japan, Typhoon Kong-Ray. So it's really one of the worst years for Japan when it comes to these natural disasters.
In other news, China has called off a security meeting planned for this month with US Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis. That's according to a senior US official who said it was unclear if or when it would be rescheduled or the reasons behind the cancellation. The move comes days after a top Chinese official said there was no reason to panic over tensions between the two countries. Beijing and Washington are currently locked in a bitter trade feud. They're also at odds over Taiwan and the South China Sea. Troops from North and South Korea began removing landmines along their heavily fortified border today. It's all part of a pact to reduce frictions and build trust on the divided peninsula. Details of the deal were hammered out between both sides during last month's summit in Pyongyang. They are said to have agreed to remove all landmines within the next 20 days. In the US, Democrat senators have expressed concerns over reports the White House was working with Republicans to narrow the scope of an FBI probe into Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. According to an official, the White House had defined the parameters of the investigation for the FBI. They also said the investigation would start with interviews with only 4 people. The panel's top Democrat has asked that the committee be provided with a copy of the instruction the White House sent to the FBI. They also requested the names of any additional witnesses or evidence if the probe is expanded. Kavanaugh has denied any allegations of sexual misconduct and assault. Well, time to switch gears now and get the latest from the world of sports. Golf first, Europe's Ryder Cup hero Francesco Molinari says beating the USA means more than winning majors. The Italian became the first ever European to win all 5 of his matches as Thomas Bjorn's men won by 17.5 points to 10.5. Molinari beat Mickelson on the 16th hole to secure the overall win. Mickelson conceded the hole after firing his tee shot into the water, with Molinari on the green. Europe won 7 of the 12 singles matches on Sunday. The USA have failed to win on European soil since 1993. In motorcycling, Spain's Ana Carrasco has made history by becoming the first female to win a world championship. The 21-year-old claimed the World Supersport 300 title by a point over compatriot Mika Perez. Despite starting 25th in Sunday's final in France, she fought her way up to the 13th place, and that was enough for the title. And finally, some lucky youngsters in Kenya got the chance to have a friendly kickabout with Prince William on Sunday. The Duke of Cambridge missed a few chances before finally putting the ball in the net. He handed out football shirts from Aston Villa, the team he famously supports. The Prince was visiting in his role as the Colonel General of the Irish Guards. He joined over 100 soldiers for military drills and inquired on the progress of their training. That's all we have time for. Bye for now.